Welcome to Blog Talk Radio in high fidelity.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio on the 12th day of October, 2016. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting Wednesdays from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it is not. On the show today, Robert Stanley, talking about things such as good ETs, bad ETs, antiquities, mysteries, the Luciferian agenda, and some other topics. I've listened to some of Robert Stanley's interviews on Alfred Weber, Project Camelot, and most recently on Late Night in the Midlands Radio. And he has some controversial things to say, and I use the word controversial because, I mean, it's very interesting, but some of the things he said in some of his talks are things that seem to run counter to what many people have heard, like stuff he has to say about Enki, among other things. I'm going to give him the floor to talk about the Luciferian agenda when he comes on, and I see this maybe he in the queue here. All I see is 111-111-1111. Robert Stanley, if that is you, glad to have you in the queue. I will get you on and no later than 10 after the hour. Just some quick things about you. You've traveled to nearly 60 countries during your lifelong pursuit of modern and ancient mysteries, and over the past 30 years, your quest for unique ideas and information has led you to research and write about controversial subjects. You are the webmaster of unicusmagazine.com, the host of the Unicus Radio Hour, author of Close Encounters on Capitol Hill and Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., also Unicus Radio Network, producer. Okay, so we'll get you on shortly, but first, as usual, the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. And excuse me for a moment here, folks. I would like to reload the page to make sure I get the most up-to-date news stories here. Not going to be too many news stories today, I don't think. And by the way, folks, bear with me. I am battling the common cold at the moment. Very sore throat on Saturday. It went away on Sunday. I thought the cold was gone, but that was just a precursor to the sniffles and the congestion that was going to come after that. So I'm going to suck it up and battle through that. Not going to call out sick for my radio show because of a little common cold. Nothing to worry about. But anyway, enough of that. First article, Hillary banished me from my father, Bill Clinton's quote-unquote son speaks. In his first interview, Danny Williams reaches out to his father. Danny Williams, who claims to be Bill Clinton's alleged son, stated on the Alex Jones show that Hillary Clinton banished him from seeing his father. Well, I could certainly imagine Hillary Clinton would have the final say in whether or not her adulterous husband, Bill, could see his sons and daughters, be they born out of wedlock or whatever they were born out of, because Hillary Clinton could not give a rat's ass if her husband cheats on her because she's just there to control him in so many ways. She could care less about what Monica Lewinsky did. She just wants to control Bill. That's why she didn't show any shame when she said, "I regret staying with Bill." And no, you didn't. You just want us to think you do. You're just there to control him. You sick reptile alien Hillary. And yeah, I've said it multiple times. Arizona Wilder and David Icke's Revelations of the Mother Goddess documentary said, I saw Hillary Clinton before I knew she was Hillary Clinton, referencing all the times that she saw political and corporate leaders shapeshift from human to reptilian form and vice versa, at satanic rituals that she was participating in as a mind control slave. And I've also heard a lot of things about Hillary having some sort of a clone, some debate as to whether that clone would have Hillary's soul in it or not. So Hillary being an Illuminati Grand Dame, as Fritz Springmeier exposed in his Bloodlines of the Illuminati book, is higher up on the Illuminati ladder than Bill is, and would definitely have the final say in deciding whether or not Bill could or could not see his children. So nothing shocking about that. Another article about Bill Clinton's son. Bill Clinton's son tells Hillary, step aside. Danny wanted to meet his dad, but Hillary ran him off like a dog. Oh, it's just another thing about this. His full name, Danny Lee Williams, and he says he has many compelling reasons to believe that he's the biological son of former President William Jefferson Clinton. He's saying, I'm simply seeking the truth, and thus I respectfully requesting that former President Clinton supply court-verified sample of his DNA to be compared with mine to determine paternity. Looking at some face-to-face shots of him and Bill side by side here, there are similarities, but yet there aren't similarities. I mean, he's dark-skinned and such, but Danny Williams is, and Bill Clinton's white. And, well, however, the shape of the face does seem to have some striking similarities here, but that could just be power of suggestion and all that. So, my God, this Sun seems to be taking control of all the InfoWars articles at the moment here. InfoWars.com show exclusive bash Bill Clinton's son needs your help to reunite with father. He wants our help, and he's coming out to ask us to make that possible. He appeared on the show Wednesday today asking for our help. And there's a link here to share. So you guys, if you want to help this kid, find out if, well, he's not a kid. He's 30. Well, some might still call him a kid. But anyway, the point is he wants some help from us sharing this link, sharing this interview, and all. So by all means, guys, if you can do that, go ahead and do that. Next article, CNN panelist. Bill Clinton rape allegations are effing ridiculous, dude. That's a quote, effing ridiculous, dude. More in-depth analysis from the Clinton News Network. A CNN panelist dismissed Bill Clinton's documented history of sexual abuse against women as effing ridiculous, dude, on a broadcast of Aaron Burnett out front as the networks continue to cover for the Clintons while devoting vast swaths of airtime to Trump's locker room banter tape from 2005. We're seeing so an ad where Trump was saying some things about women that any man might say if he doesn't approve of a woman's looks. And they try to twist that in such ways to demonize Trump in the most ridiculous ways. And some people are susceptible enough to fall for that. So, I mean, you want to demonize Hillary Clinton, just show all the things that she's done that the FBI got her off the hook for. So, you guys are welcome to check this interview. Don't have time to talk much more about it. Next article, here's why Haitians are urging you not to donate to the Red Cross. A large portion of the funds ended up squandered by the organization. As the death toll in Haiti following Hurricane Matthew reaches 1,000 and 1.4 million people are left in need of humanitarian assistance, reports of deadly cholera outbreaks are beginning to concern aid groups. But despite the desperate pleas for help coming from the hurricane-torn island nation, some Haitians are not thrilled about the presence of scandal-ridden organizations such as the American Red Cross or even the Clinton Foundation in their country. And the American Red Cross, the Red Cross shape, that is a symbol that could be construed as Illuminati in nature, Knights Templar connections, if you will. And Knights Templar now moving to the modern times, things that they morphed into, the Red Cross, which is an Illuminati organization that comes to other countries under the guise of helping people. And a lot of people that work for the Red Cross, and this is also true with Amnesty International, by the way, they claim that they're helping people, and they are helping people, the people within the organization, but behind the curtain, people that work for the Illuminati who are higher up on the ladder of authority, they try to execute the agenda of the Illuminati in the countries that the Red Cross are going to. Now, I have recently gotten some emails from like United and American Airlines saying if you donate to the Red Cross or some other organizations that are Illuminati front groups like the World Wildlife Fund, which does for animals what the Red Cross does for humans while under the guise of an Illuminati agenda, it says if you donate to them, you will get a lot of airline miles, which for me is not such a bad thing, getting airline miles, because I try to travel whenever there's a conference or something that I can go to and be a big activator at, because one of my jobs is to be a conference activator. So says Helene Lipson of In5D. And I don't think she's from In5D anymore. But anyway, point is, even if I can get miles, and even if all you people who do get those emails saying you can get miles if you donate to the Red Cross and such, so please do donate. Just because the money that you're donating is not going to help people, I think maybe the miles aren't worth it. Don't donate. If you've already donated, fine. Just learn your lesson from this. It's not in your best interest to do that. So enough of that. Next article, State Department won't comment on Clinton emails claim of Saudi Qatari support for ISIS. Kirby would not, quote, speak about the veracity of leaked documents and whether they're authentic or not, unquote. State Department spokesman John Kirby on Tuesday declined to comment on a claim purportedly contained in an email sent by Hillary Clinton in 2014. Sorry, my cold's getting better at me there. About Saudi and Qatari government support for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. But Kirby stressed that the U.S. relies on two Sunni monarchies in the campaign against the jihadist group. Well, the U.S. government is not against the jihadist group. They fund and control the jihadist group. the government's of Qatar and the government is Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia, monarchy there, and the government of Qatar. It's definitely allies in a sense with the Roman Empire of the modern era that is the United States government. So, of course, he's not going to comment on any email claim of email that Hillary Clinton did, because Hillary Clinton and email scandal go hand in hand, and Hillary using emails in ways that support national security are not common. They go against national security interests. Last article here, Putin, hacks in U.S. have, quote, nothing to do with Russia's interests. Putin appeared to relish the attention his country is getting in the U.S. presidential campaign. Russian President Vladimir Putin told a business forum in Moscow that his nation is not responsible for the hacking of Democratic Party emails in the United States, and I can assure you he most definitely is not. That's only speaking out of my gut and my heart and my discernment telling me that, but anybody with any shred of common sense could tell you that that's clearly the truth. Americans who are lost in a trance would tell you that Vladimir Putin is not a very good guy. However, the Illuminati bloodline seem to have lost great control over Vladimir Putin and his comrades in the Russian government. I used to say Putin and his cronies in the Russian government. Now I'm starting to say Putin and his comrades, because, hey, they're leaking information like a sieve that the powers that be don't want us to hear. And Russia Today, I mean, I don't really watch them. I lost a lot of trust in RT. Russia used to be Russia Today. Now it's RT News Network. After the Sandy Hook massacre, they were still anti-gun, and then I stopped listening to them. But now maybe they've changed their tune and are leaking a lot of information. And the Russian government seems to know more about the ET agenda, about the ET cover-up and UFO cover-up than any other national government on planet Earth. Maybe I'll talk with that Robert Stanley when I get him on. And with that being said, I am already a little bit 1 minute past the hour. Hi, Andrew, getting better from your cold. I hope so. Says Gemini Moon in the chat room. Hopefully I am. You're the only person in the chat room right now, so hopefully other people will tune in. This show, like I have for the past 2 weeks, is also broadcast on CapricornRadio.com. I am streaming that, and next week will be the last show on Blog Talk Radio, but more on that later. Robert Stanley, sorry for being 2 minutes behind schedule. I believe this is you in the queue. I hope it is. Is this you? You're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. And starting off, I'd like to give you the floor to talk about the whole Luciferian agenda thing. Now, I've listened to 2 of your recent interviews, the one that you did with Carrie Cassidy in a Project Camelot interview, and then the one you did shortly thereafter on Late Night in the Midlands Radio, which is shown on the Non-Human Entities YouTube channel. Even though some of the things that you have said are things that run counter to what some people believe, I really don't want you to spend too much time talking about that in your little monologue that I'm giving you a chance to talk about here, because I'd specifically like to ask you the questions about that after you're done. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about and know what I'm going to ask. But this whole Luciferian agenda thing, without getting too much into detail, the controversy behind whether or not the facts you allege are true, why don't you tell us the story as you know it, as you believe it, as what your research has suggested? And there was some other guy that you referenced several times in your interview on Late Night in the Midlands Radio. As soon as I heard his name, I wanted to get... You remember who that guy was?
Yeah, the researcher, colleague, his name is Wes Penray. Penre.
Yeah, Wes Penray. Yeah, that's another guy you've referenced a lot. Maybe you can reference him a lot in your little monologue here, his work too, because he seemed to be a frequent source. I'll definitely try to get him on my show. So you got the floor here. Tell us all about this Luciferian agenda, the history, the present day, the future, what it's all about. And then after that, I'll start asking you the questions about the controversial statements. You got the floor.
Okay, thanks. I was listening to what you were reporting about the news, and you're right. The Red Cross is symbolic of the Knights Templar emblem, as well as the Knights of Malta. But it's also the false light that was created by Lucifer here. You can see this in some of the Sumerian depictions of the Anunnaki, specifically Marduk, who's one of Lucifer's sons. He's also known by the name Enki. or Ea, E-A it's spelled, or in Egypt it was Ptah, and he has many different titles, as I said, but these are not so much names as they are titles. Currently, his son Marduk, also known as Ra, is the one that is in charge, and they leave their symbols all over the place. It's not by accident. It's a way of marking their turf, not just to outsiders, but to people that are part of that empire, his illegitimate rebel empire. So I'm not surprised when I see it these days. It's very easy for me to recognize. It's troubling, though. You know, you'd also mentioned something about Hillary Clinton, whatever she may be. There's another explanation, is that there may be multiple copies of her that are actually androids, and I find that very disturbing. I mean, she joked about it when she was on the campaign trail with a couple of young girls, where they were interviewing her and asked her why she just doesn't sweat. And she gave this bizarre answer, and she launched into this whole thing about how she was an android. And at first blush, you would say, "Well, she's just trying to be funny." But to me, there's nothing funny about that, because it's one of the things that I've been working very hard to report recently through my website and through talk shows like this, is that the Luciferian agenda is also the artificial intelligence agenda that they're pushing really hard. So transhumanism is another way of saying artificial intelligence, singularity, and it's been in the making for some time, but it's not new. It was brought here a long time ago when Enki, or Lucifer, came here and took over. This world originally was part of the Orion Empire, and it was originally established by his mother, the Queen of Orion, and was being looked after by her younger son, Lucifer's half-brother. Some people call him Enlil. We could call him, that's a title. Some people call him Michael. He like everybody else in this, they have a lot of different names, but the bottom line is he's not crazy. He's not a psychopath. And most entities in this universe are not. It's just unfortunate that Enki, or Lucifer, is a psychopath. He suffers from multiple personality disorder, as well as he's infested with mental parasites that he inadvertently created a long time ago. And so anyway, he brought a lot of problems here. He took over illegally. He captured this world as well as many others, and had enslaved them in his empire. So essentially, and I know this is controversial, and I apologize for upsetting people. I don't really enjoy doing this, but I think people have a right to know, or at least consider what I'm saying as a possible alternative explanation to what we've been told, which is that this world is actually part of Lucifer's empire, and it's vast, and it's competing with his family. So he's the one that triggered the civil war in space, or from a Christian perspective, what they call the war in heaven. And it wasn't so much because of his pride, it's because he went mad. And even though he was born into a royal family, he was unable, or not allowed to, he was unfit to rule. At some points, whenever this was that he went crazy, his parents obviously realized that he would not make a good king. He was not fit to rule, so they told him, that, and he just said, "Well, screw you, I'm going to go and start my own empire," which he did, and that's what triggered the Civil War. And essentially, we're casualties of that. We are, in my opinion, behind enemy lines here, and this is all subterfuge, what we're seeing here. I mean, again, Hillary Clinton is a good friend, or was a good friend, of Saul Alinsky, who is an avowed Luciferian. President Obama is also a student of Saul Alinsky, has said so. And I have found in the second book that I wrote about Washington, D.C., called Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., I wrote two books actually, but my investigation of UFOs and extraterrestrials in Washington, D.C. led me to the conclusion that there are not only people that are Luciferian or satanic, but most of them know it. The rest of them just go along with it because the entire power structure was set up that way a long time ago. I mean, this is not new. None of this is new. Is that enough foundational stuff for us to get into the questions?
Oh, I guess so. And you mentioned this whole thing about the whole Edley and Enki thing. I'm going to need to ask you to give me a couple minutes to give my side of the story from what I've heard. And in that late night in the Midlands radio thing, you said lots of people who study the work of Zecharia Sitchin and such would assert you got it backwards. It's Enlil who's the bad guy and Enki who's the good guy, and you assert no. That's what we've been led to believe. And
Correct.
Well, here's the thing. Lots of people have been, and I'm asserting something myself here, that I have the sources that back this up, that all that stuff about Zecharia Sitchin being a liar, a fraud, and that he was wrong is itself disinformation. All that stuff about Zecharia Sitchin being a CIA and Illuminati disinfo agent is itself disinformation. Now, where am I making that assertion? Well, Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis, who is arguably my number one source of info for this show, I believe he's the best source out there because his ability to read the Akashic Records could correctly answer any question out there. So unless he unintentionally misspeaks, what he says can easily be taken as true, because if the Akashic Records say it, then it must be true. And he's just regurgitating what the Akashic Records are saying. He asserted in an interview with Lance White that he did in the summer 2013, that Zecharia Sitchin's first three books, in terms of the events, are extremely accurate. Not the timelines, he was off there, but in terms of the events, he was accurate. A couple things there. The Anunnaki didn't come from Nibiru to mine gold to shield the atmosphere of Nibiru. He said that was something else. He also said they were lured here by interdimensional entity and didn't come here on a mission. And other than that, for the most part, he was accurate. Now, I was caught off guard when I heard that, because I remembered Leo Zagami in his Project Camelot interview saying that Sitchin was a Illuminati disinfo agent who had the job of lying and spreading lies about humanity's history to support the cause of the Vatican, Zionists, and such. And also Arizona Wilder, I mentioned her talk about seeing Hillary Clinton as reptilian alien before she saw her as a human. She also said in that same interview with David Icke back in the late 90s that she saw Zecharia Sitchin as a reptilian alien at satanic rituals. And she said his job was to disinform about the reptilians and the Illuminati. David Icke said, well, that might explain why Sitchin warned me not to discuss anything about reptile aliens when I asked him why he never said anything about reptilians and serpents in his Earth Chronicles books, even though there was a lot of evidence from ancient Sumeria that a serpent race of ETs did exist that may have made an alliance with the Anunnaki from Nibiru that he talked about. And realizing that this did not resonate with what Andrew Bartzis said, I had the chance to meet Bartzis at a conference in Sarasota, Florida, which, by the way, I'll be going to this weekend for another In5D conference. But this one was in October 2013, I think it was, when I saw Bartzis, and I decided to put him on the spot, and I told him all this stuff that I just told you, and I said, so how could Sitchin have been accurate if he was literally a reptilian disinformer? Bartzis told me that Leo Zagami and Arizona Wilder were actually spreading disinformation that they thought was true. Some entities that he referred to as timeline watchers, excuse me, they manipulated Arizona Wilder and Leo Zagami's physical body and spirit body through a complex mechanism that he would need quite a long time to explain, but he was just summarizing it to me to make them say that stuff about Sitchin, which they thought was true, but really wasn't. And there's been some other things said about Sitchin, like he was quick to sue anybody who challenged his work and people died trying to debunk him. No, that's other stuff that was put in our timeline to discredit him and keep us from knowing that he was accurate. And I wish the world wasn't this complicated, but hey, if Bartzis says it, it must be true. And realizing that, okay, if Sitchin is right, then that must mean, okay, where are you getting the idea that Enki's wrong? And not only that, you say that Enki and Enlil and Marduk, they come from Orion. People would hear that and say, no, they come from the planet Nibiru, which is in a 3,600-year elliptical orbit in our solar system. So there's two subjects we can talk about that people are scratching their heads about that don't resonate with what you're saying. Could you maybe try to debunk those claims that I've just made?
Well, I'm not here to debunk anything. I'll talk to you about it, but I mean, look, I know Mr. Burritz, and I don't know why you give him such credibility. I mean, you're just taking his word for it. He could say anything, and there's no proof whatsoever other than you're taking his word for it because he can read the Akashic records and you can't. I mean, to me, that sounds a little bit silly, but you're entitled to do that. It doesn't seem credible as a source of information. It's just his opinion. As far as Sitchin goes, have you noticed there's a book that a lot of people reference from him called the Book of Enki, the Lost Book of Enki?
Haven't read about it, but I've heard it. I haven't read it, but I've heard about it.
Okay, it's fiction. It says right in the front, it's fiction. It's what Sitchin thinks Enki would have said. Now look, there was another brother involved in all this. His name was Thoth in Egyptian terms. He was the one, and he's known, again, they're all known by many different names, but Thoth, Hermes, Mercury, whatever you want to call him, was responsible for creating over 30,000 books. I don't think he personally wrote them. I think he was the overseer, the scribe of the gods. And he was the brother to Marduk, Ra. And at some point when Enki put Marduk in charge, when Enki left to go take care of other issues within his empire off this world, Marduk was put in charge and the libraries were destroyed and or hidden. New records were put in their place that made Marduk and Enki look completely different. Thoth is nowhere to be found. He was taken off this world. He's banished from this place. We are not supposed to know him. We're not supposed to read his works. Anybody who reads those Hermetic works is considered a heretic.
That's interesting. This whole thing about Thoth, he's got a lot of, he comes up often when it comes to the history of the earth. And people that are familiar with Egyptian mythology would assert, where are you making the assertion that he's real? Now, the ancient Egyptians, they, excuse me, they were very adamant, and this isn't me talking, this is Robert Bouval talking, best known for the Orion mystery thing. He asserts the Egyptians were very clear about their belief that their gods came from the stars, be it Sirius or some other possible system. And, well, one would wonder, were they just duped into believing that by ancestors of the Illuminati who were controlling their culture, their society? And like Jordan Maxwell says, the difference between religion and mythology is if you believe something and you believe it to be true, it's your religion. But if someone else, like your neighbor, believes something else and you don't believe that, then you would call that their mythology. That's the difference between religion and mythology. I mean, people say Egyptian mythology. Well, you could say Egyptian religion, but that doesn't make sense anymore because nobody really believes Egyptian mythology to be a true thing. So you're not going to say it's religion because everybody thinks it's mythology. But is it? Because the Egyptians said, no, our gods came from the stars. But like I said, that begs the question, were they suckered into believing a religion, just like lots of people that believe the present day religions are suckered into believing something that suppresses their consciousness, which people like David Icke have asserted for years what religions do. They suppress your consciousness. And that begs the question, where can you make the assertion that someone like Thoth is real?
I think all of those guys were real. But I think the information that we're getting at this point is badly distorted and highly suspect. We would have known a lot more if the library at Alexandria had not been destroyed. I believe that Hermes, Thoth, was the one that was originally in charge of that repository of knowledge. ensuring that humans were, and I think this was done by Enki. If you look into the history, allegedly he wanted us to be more intelligent. Other beings did not. You know, there's a huge controversy about this. As slaves, you know, why make us more intelligent? It just means we'll be harder to control. It's the same reason, like when slaves from Africa were brought to America, it was illegal to educate them. So apparently there's an internal struggle within the Luciferian Empire as to how much information or education or intelligence that we are permitted to have as servants or slaves within the empire.
Okay, fair enough. And regarding the name Luciferian, if you're an expert on the difference, just as a source I want to get out there, Mark Passio has done a masterpiece talk on the difference between Satanism and Luciferianism. I recommend anybody check that out. But just for people that aren't familiar with this and confuse it too, could you perhaps compare and contrast Satanism and Luciferianism? And after you compare and contrast them, a lot of people, when they hear the name Lucifer, they think of connections to the planet Venus, because like Lucifer, Lightbringer, and there's been a lot of legends and such saying that connects to Venus and has nothing to do with like the Orion related stuff that you've talked about. So just for people that are hearing what you're saying and are confused about it, could you clarify that? And like I said, compare and contrast Luciferianism and Satanism.
Yeah, okay. So from a Christian perspective, they say that Lucifer, when he was in heaven, that was his title, the light bearer. When he came to earth, when he fell to earth, or was cast to earth, then he became Satan. My understanding is that Lucifer, and that's just one of his titles, Enki is probably a better name we could use, but again, it's just a title. One of his sons is Marduk. It's known as Ra, but he is also Satan. He is the one that is known as Satan. And he is the god of this world. He's currently in charge of this world.
Thanks. And when you're talking about many different gods and goddesses, which have different names over the course of time, that this gets back to what I said earlier about whether religions and mythology have grains of truth to them. Some people like Zachariah Sitchin would say, it's all true. However, over the course of time, it's been distorted and such, like the like Noah and the flood. I mean, there was no Noah and there was no great flood in the time it was alleged to be, by some would say, but the Gilgamesh story, the character Utnapishtim, that's what Noah's based on. That guy was real, and there was a flood like in there, and like Enki and Enlil, they were real, and gods and goddesses that are modeled after them are frauds and such. Like here we go. Now here's another controversial one. Moses. Like some say Moses never existed, but Akhenaten did, and it has been said that the story of Moses is a mimicry on Akhenaten, who was a real pharaoh and a very controversial one at that. So when you're looking at religions that are fiction, is there any criteria that you can think of, or there's so many variables into this, you can't really say there's a criteria, how you determine whether or not these have some grain of truth to it, going all the way back to the beginning when these stories first came out as history and then were twisted to become some sort of religion, mythology, or fantasy?
Oh, God. There aren't any records of the very first time. We just have a distant memory of it. The further you go back, the more distorted the whole picture becomes, and that's done intentionally. Modern religion, in my opinion, all of them were created and are maintained by Lucifer and his crew, his empire. We're part of that. They want us to worship them. The word literally means to work for. We work for them. We are subjects of their empire. So any way and every way they can think of to manipulate us to be more servile and useful to their agenda, they're going to do it. I mean, right up to the present. You know, let's cut to the chase here, man. the reason that nanobots and chemtrails and artificial intelligence and all that stuff, GMOs, 3D printing, all this crap, the reason it's in our face is because he has an agenda for us. It was happening back in the days of Atlantis. He would already plan to create a contingent here of very advanced, what we would consider very advanced soldiers, military, communications experts that he was going to then teleport or use a portal. In other words, get us from here to there, to bring it directly to his family in the court of Orion. He wanted to use us to penetrate the inner sanctorum of his family on his behalf so that he could just take over everything. It didn't work out that way. I'm not sure how the flood was triggered, but it was triggered. That's universal. That's in every culture on this planet. And the reason it happened is because Enki was using us, as he is still using us, because we're the new Atlantis, whether you like it or not. This is the new Atlantis. He rebuilt the whole damn thing after it was wiped out. And this whole nonsense about super soldiers and secret space program in my opinion, is a smokescreen. It's not like they just suddenly came out of nowhere and did this. This has been going on for a long, long, long time. It's like saying UFOs just showed up in 1947. That's just insanity. Spacecraft have always been here for millennia. We got here because of spacecraft. We are all extraterrestrial. We are all extra dimensional. But we're in a position here. Like I said, we're behind enemy lines. We're caught up in a conflict that's been raging for hundreds of thousands of years. The first casualty of war is truth. There's also something else they call the fog of war, where it's very difficult to get any real information because there's a lot of propaganda and misinformation that's being spread around for various reasons. So there's a lack of real intelligence, meaning information that's available to us.
Yeah, that's all the more reason why it's very important to use discernment to figure out which information is true and which is not, and which has only partial grains of truth to it. But getting back to Orion, starting to see the constellation in the sky now. It's that time of year where it's coming out in the northern hemisphere. And how does this whole thing tie in? This whole thing that you say Orion is where the bad guys are coming from. Well, some factions of bad guys anyway. Some might say, well, that kind of makes sense because Orion has been asserted by some to be like the male energy dominant area of the Milky Way. Planet Earth, Mother Earth, I should say, is a feminine energy based entity planet. So naturally, if bad guys wanted to take over this world, you would think the bad guys would, for the most part, have to be of a male energy aspect, and Orion would be the perfect place for them to come from. So I'm wondering how that maybe ties in, the whole male energy connection to Orion. How does that tie in, metaphysically speaking, with the bad guys and their agenda for planet Earth, Mother Earth? Yeah.
Okay. My understanding is that the Queen of Orion is sovereign and supreme. It is not the king. In Native American cultures, the women are the ones that were actually taking a leadership role. It was matriarchal. In fact, most civilizations on this planet up until recently were matriarchal, and they have been slowly eradicated because Enki is a misogynist. He hates women. He certainly hates his mother because she was the one that told him you cannot ascend to the kingship of the court of Orion. A lot of people think Orion is a place that is negative. The only negative thing that came out of there, in my opinion, was Enki. And he's not really bad. I don't hate him, okay? I want people to be very clear about this. He's ill. He's insane. And there's no point in hating somebody who's like that, okay? He can't control himself. That doesn't excuse his behavior at all. That's not what I'm saying. But he is insane, and he's suffering. And he's caused a lot of suffering. Everywhere he goes, he's been causing a lot of suffering. And furthering his insane agenda. It is insane. It's also unsustainable. You know, part of what he did was, in order to shore up his empire, was to create a false matrix that we're living in, and it's run by an artificial intelligence. It is essentially broadcasting not only through Saturn, but beyond that, from points I don't even understand, where the core of it is creating a construct, and we live in it. It's the analogy is, it's a matrix, like in the movie. We live in a false universe that was created by Enki, and it's being maintained by the artificial intelligences that he created to work for him directly. He did this a long time ago in relative terms, okay? He did a lot of manipulation here too, to all the life forms that were here, that were brought from different parts of the Orion Empire, which is vast. It's not just the 3 belt stars of Orion we're talking about here, okay? Let's be clear. We're talking about a massive empire that across the Milky Way galaxy, perhaps even beyond. But even that is incredibly small compared to this known universe, which is just one of an infinite number of universes, as far as I'm concerned. So the false matrix, or this false universe that we're living in here, is dominated by this false light, this particular frequency we were discussing earlier. It's been accidentally discovered recently, just this year, that when you slow a photon down and literally take a picture of it, the red cross is what you see. That's exactly what it looks like. But this, again, is a construct. It's designed to control us. You understand that DNA, it receives light as well as emits light. So the light that we receive has a direct effect on our entire system. But we also project light. We emit light through our DNA all the time. When we're healthy, it's one frequency. When we're traumatized, it's a completely different frequency. And that is what the Luciferian or satanic entities feed off of. That's why they want us to constantly harm ourselves and each other, because they need that energy in order to survive. They've cut themselves off from creation, essentially, in this false matrix that he created, that is supported by his followers, including artificial intelligence, which is really not intelligent per se. It's a synthetic life form. People need to understand this. It's copying real organic life, but it's not real. It's synthetic. It's emulating something. And this is true for everything about the Luciferian Empire. It's psychopathic. He is psychopathic, meaning that he's lost his ability to be empathic. It's the opposite polarity. Psychopath has no emotional connection to anyone. An empath has an emotional connection to everyone. And that was our natural state. And I should say that is the natural state of a healthy human being. But he's not healthy. And most people on this planet are being brutalized by psychopaths, mostly politicians, but not entirely. And because we are still waking up to this, that we're under a spell. It's like we're sleepwalking. We've been mesmerized by this to a point where we don't recognize when somebody is a psychopath until it's too late. And they know that, by the way. They know how to pretend. They can simulate someone who is an empath. They know how to pretend like they have emotions. Like, for example, Bill Clinton, I feel your pain. No, you don't. Or you wouldn't rape women. Okay? That's just impossible. If you're a psychopath, it's easy. You know, so sorry. There's a lot. The thing is, I don't want to just ramble at you, Andrew. I'd prefer. I'm trying to keep my answers really short so that we can have a conversation here.
Hey, we got to go a full 2 hours. So if you want to ramble, be my guest. I have no intention of interrupting you because, well, that's not the kind of host I am. But
Okay.
there's a lot of things that we could certainly bring up, because I've heard a lot of things you say that don't really resonate with some other people have said. And I'm the kind of radio host that if I hear a contradiction, an alarm bell's instantly going to go off my head saying, aha, there's something that contradicts what someone else says. I need to address it. So it's only natural that's kind of what I do.
But here's the problem. Look, I understand what you're saying. All right. And that's fine. You can do that. But you're never going to come to a resolution on this, because we're all being fed misinformation at some level. So, of course, we're going to contradict one another. That's part of the plan. They have worked, the Luciferians have worked incredibly hard to keep us at each other's throat. They want us to remain divided, because in that way we will remain conquered by them. And it works. It's been working, and it's still working very, very well. One of the main things they do not want us to understand is that we are all related. This crap about different races is nonsense. And different religions, again, or political or economical. These are just all ways that they have manifested to manipulate us and divide us and keep us under their control. More importantly, so that we will constantly be confronting one another, either physically or emotionally or both. So we are unable to work together, to unite against the common problem here, which is these parasites, these entities.
And let's talk about those parasites a little bit more. And let me make it very clear to all these listeners of mine who are saying you shouldn't talk about these guys and give them your attention. You're giving them your power. No, we are not. We are talking about them for the sake of exposing them, putting them a stop to their agenda. And if your intent is to talk about them to put a stop to their agenda and expose them, then no, you are not giving them your power. I want to make that very clear to all those new age baloney folks out there who seem to that's the way it works. No, the law of attraction, metaphysics doesn't work like that. We intend to stop their agenda. So we're going to talk about them with that intent. So with that being said, we do need to get a little bit into the history of the Archons. And look, say what you want about how you think Andrew Bartz. Maybe you don't think he's saying, well, if he says it must be true because he can read the Akashic records, it's not really the best way to go. I'm still going to use him as a source here. He pointed out that the Archon control system in some way, shape, or form has existed on Mother Earth for 900,000 years. Now, hearing that date, I'm thinking, okay, 900,000 years. Isn't that like Lemuria time? A lot of people would think of Atlantis and Lemuria as utopias, but that's totally wrong. They weren't utopias. They did have flaws. And one of the reasons you could make the case that they had flaws, going all the way back to Lemuria in this case, is because there was an Archon control system in some way on that planet, even though the people of Lemuria did have a much higher level of consciousness than we do in the present time. Now, also this whole 900,000 years thing, how does that resonate with some other mythologies? I remember an episode of Ancient Aliens. They talked about this Mayan god named Bolon Yokte. And Eric von Daniken claimed that one of the 2012 tablets said that on December 21st, 2012, will descend from heaven the god Bolon Yokte, and some Mayan museum curator, don't remember his name, but he said Bolon Yokte is a very misunderstood god. It's not very sure what he symbolizes, not very clear what he symbolizes. However, Georgia Tsoukalos, the guy with the funky hair and all, he pointed something out about how Bolon Yokte, there are Mayan myths saying that he came to Earth. He and some other entities first arrived on Earth 900,000 years ago. When I heard that, I'm thinking, okay, so how does that tie in with the Archon control system? Or is there any connection whatsoever? So this whole thing about Archons giving an actual time frame for when they arrived and maybe how it ties into this Mayan myth. Do you have anything to say about this?
Sure. I mean, again, I don't think we can give accurate dates on this, in my opinion. I think that would be really hard, if not impossible to do, or at least in a way that you can actually validate. It's nice to have some number to throw out there, but my understanding is that Enki showed up here infected by those parasites that he inadvertently created off-world. When he showed up here, that was about 400,000 years ago. But this planet had already been seeded and turned into as an experiment, a living library of DNA from around the Orion Empire. The people that lived here were very different in the sense that they were hermaphrodite. They were much taller. Everything was much larger at that time. And there wasn't any predatory or parasitic behavior going on this world at that time. That all came later when Enki showed up and took over and turned this from a paradise into a prison.
Thank you. And when some prominent figure talking about the Archons, when they, no, excuse me, not when, but what, also when, but what caused them to come here. John Lash, there's a few things about his work that it sounds cool and all, but I mean, he seems to be getting the sources right and all. He says that, well, I'm using the best possible source out there. I'm using the Gnostic text. The Gnostics, they talked a lot about the Archons, and there were people who were trying to shut up the Gnostics. So the fact that they were trying to shut up the Gnostics shows that there must be a lot of truth to what they were talking about. And Lash, he's talked about how the Mother Earth was trying to be like different from a lot of other planets and stars and other bodies in the universe. And in trying to be different, it did something to itself that caused the Archon control system to form on Mother Earth. And one thing that I don't really resonate with Lash's claim, and I think he does claim this somewhere, is that the Archons were here first. No, many people, including Andrew Bartzis and also Jim Self, who I interviewed, say no, that's bullcrap. Mother Earth was originally created as a 7-dimensional seed planet, and the significance behind that is that once you get up to the 7th dimension of consciousness, there's no more service to self-behavior. It's strictly service to others. So you could make the case that Mother Earth was originally created as a place for entities to learn how to become service to others' entities. And the Archons and also the reptilians, they weren't here first. Now, people like Alex Collier have said the reptilians from Draconis, they were the first to plant the flag here. Well, they may have been the first here from a standpoint of galactic colonization, but they were not the first ones here overall, because Mother Earth was a 7-dimensional seed planet. So do you know where Lash is making these claims that the Archons were here first and they formed here because Mother Earth was trying to be different from all the other planets, and trying to be different caused her to like shoot out from the center of the galaxy? I think there's something in the story that he's talked about, and that was how the Archons are formed, if you know what I'm talking about here. So if you know anything about this, please try to clarify what I'm saying and tell us where you agree and disagree on this whole thing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't agree with his interpretation of the Nag Hammadi text, and to rely on them so heavily is a mistake, in my opinion, because again, we're talking about literally the tip of an iceberg. Those are just a few books of what was hundreds of thousands of books in the Library of Alexandria that were all Gnostic. They were all Hermetic. They had a completely different history of the planet. And that's one of the reasons they were destroyed. And so it's highly suspect that when those jars are found in a cave, that was the only bit of information that it would be like finding a stack of books from the Library of Congress, and then you read them and you go, yep, everything in the Library of Congress is right here in this stack of books that we found here off in a cave. It's ludicrous, you know. So his interpretation of those very, 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 very small number of Gnostic scrolls, he also seems to think that he says they talk about reptilians being the Archons, which I don't disagree. But he also says that there's this other entity that he says are the Greys, which he has that completely wrong. Those are the mental parasites that I've seen, that other people have photographed. Castanedas calls the flyers, and they are what the Islamists would call jinn. So these things have been around for a very long time in relative terms, but they're not original to this planet. They were brought here. As I said before, the genesis of all of that, in my understanding, is that it was brought here by Enki unintentionally. He unintentionally went insane. Nobody wants to go insane, but the little bit of information or the clue that I was given a long time ago was written by a friend of my father. His name was Norman Paulson. And he allegedly was given this by benevolent human extraterrestrials in the 1950s. I don't know if it's true. I think a lot of what he said was not true, but again, this particular piece of the puzzle, he claims he was told that Lucifer and his crew, before they came here, were builders of worlds. I can accept that. And they were doing that using their consciousness. That was part of their divine birthright. We all have that ability, by the way. We can create with our consciousness. In fact, everything is created with that, but I don't want to get off on that tangent right now. It's important to know that Lucifer, Enki, was not always like this. He was a benevolent, divine builder of worlds at one point, and he was working with other divine, benevolent builders of worlds. He allegedly went into a zone that was forbidden because it was considered to be dangerous. He felt, as a divine being, a god, that he would be immune. So he and his crew ventured in there, and they were so badly traumatized by the energy in there that they literally became multiple personality disorders. In other words, their soul fragmented, and that's why I say they're insane. And they also, unintentionally, their consciousness, they manifested these little thought forms that are parasitic, which I have seen. As I said, those things do exist. So when Lucifer and his crew ultimately made their way out of that forbidden zone, and they had gone insane, and they were self-infected, they turned around and started destroying worlds that they had once built. And as I say, when he finally made his way home, that things went from bad to worse. And it hasn't gotten much better as far as I can tell. But then again, I don't have the whole history. I don't think anybody does. And I'm trying to get back to what you're saying about Mr. Lash. I tried communicating to him, and he just refused. So, okay, fine. He's busy with his agenda. I don't know what his agenda is. I honestly don't care. And a lot of people bring it up in conversation with me, and I have nothing against him personally. But I do think he's going down the wrong path. As you had mentioned earlier, we're not just focused on these things entirely. I mean, the reason we're focusing on these things is because it's a problem. People need to know they have a problem before they'll act to solve the problem. Okay, so I really don't think that there's anything wrong with discussing the problem and how it originated. If you go to a doctor and they want to diagnose you, right? They're going to say, so when did you first notice this? And how were you feeling before then? These are simple diagnostic tools. We have to, and of course, I'm not saying I have all the answers and everybody else is wrong. I think everybody is trying to figure it out, and that nobody knows for sure yet. That's why I keep an open mind. It's not, people say, oh, do you believe this? Do you believe that guy? No, I don't believe anybody. In fact, I don't even believe myself, because what we're dealing with here is a mental parasite. I've been tricked. I mean, I don't know how much of my story you know, Andrew, but I actually was confronted by Enki back in 1985, and I didn't even know it was him, because he was playing games with me like he's done to everybody else. And it took me 29 years to figure out that who I had been confronted by that night on a mountain in Malibu was Enki. And the reason he confronted...
Actually, if you want to talk about that, by all means, I'd like to give you the chance to play the role of primary source here and talk about your experience confronting Enki, and also Malibu. You mentioned Malibu. Looking at some of the articles here on your website, that place seems to come up in conversation. Tell us all about why that's the case.
Well, okay. Earlier that day, it was September 21st, 1985, there was a boy. I was working security at a very exclusive private beach in Malibu where I lived. and there was a boy who ran into a sliding glass door and broke the thing with his face, and he was bleeding to death. And I ran over there to help. And when I was there, I saw these parasites in the room at one point. Briefly, I saw, and I didn't know what they were at the time, but I instinctively felt they were parasites. And there was, I don't know, at least 8, 10 of them, maybe more, but they were floating up near the surface, near the roof of the ceiling, inside the house where this boy had done this to himself, which badly traumatized his grandparents. They were freaking out. I ran over there and called the paramedics. If I hadn't done that, he would have died right there in the house. Now, as I was there and I was, after I called the paramedics and I was helping to clean up, I was talking to his grandmother, and she said to me, "I'm glad the door was shut." I was like, "What?" And she says, "Yeah, I think he was going to jump off the railing." It was a 2-story deal. She said, "I think he was planning on jumping over the railing. He probably would have broken his neck." And anyway, as we were talking, I got the distinct impression that the boy was hearing voices. Now, at the time, 1985, I was 25 years old. I didn't know anything about schizophrenia or possession. I think they're two sides of the same coin. We're talking about these. Okay, in a modern vernacular, we call these things, people call this in a very jaded term. They say his inner demon, right? His inner demons. When somebody's addicted to drugs or alcohol, right? They say they're working on their inner demons. Well, actually, they're not internal at all. They are external, but they can affect us internally through our DNA. This has been proven by the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, that our cells are actually receptive to all kinds of signals. We don't have any filters. We don't have any protection, most of us who are unaware. We do nothing to protect ourselves from receiving signals that are external. So it's really possible. It's very easy to hack into a human emotions and thoughts. And the Islamists know this, okay? All the Muslims, if there's any listening to this program, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The jinn they predate the whole founding of Islam. Everybody in Arabia knew this to be a fact, that when you're born, there's at least one of these entities assigned to you, and that they have the ability to whisper into the souls of men, which I find very disturbing. But it fits with the narrative, okay? What I'm trying to say is everybody's infected to some degree. Obviously, that boy was infected to a maximum degree. And the reason those little parasites, well, they weren't little, I guess they were about the size of my fist. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell because I only saw them briefly. It was weird. It's like I had this realization or intuitive knowing that the boy was hearing voices. At that moment is when I suddenly saw these things in the room. To me, it looked like they suddenly manifested, but I don't think that's the case, Andrew. I think that I was in an altered state, much like the Gnostic seers or shamans. When you go into an altered state, suddenly your DNA, it is more receptive to the information that's always there that we're usually not connected to. I mean, that's one of the other insidious things that was done to us. Our DNA has been badly damaged and disrupted, and so we're like stuck on dial-up. I mean, if DNA was a fiber optic cable, most of us are still stuck on dial-up, even though there's a potential for huge bandwidth, right? So suddenly I had more bandwidth. I saw them, and then I was so freaked out by what I was seeing, it started to just fade out. And so it was very brief. But when I saw them, I felt intuitively that those were parasites. And that is what the Gnostics were talking about. So you have not only the mental parasites that they said look like a human embryo. I think they look far more like an amoeba, which is technically a parasite. They look like an amoeba, okay? But they're intelligent. They are intelligent, and they communicate, and they work. At the time, I had no way of knowing this. Okay, I had no idea, but they started to. I felt when I left the house after the paramedics arrived and they took the boy away. I went back to my job as a security guard, and I was sitting there, and I felt horrible. Now, at first, I thought it was just because of all the blood and the trauma and the adrenaline, but it persisted, and in a way I've never felt before or since, thank God. But it was in my solar plexus, and it literally felt like something was draining the energy out of my body, and I started to get very worried that it was going to kill me. That's how strong it was. I wouldn't know this till much later, but those parasites had followed me out of the home and were attacking me because I had interrupted their feeding frenzy. They were the ones who initiated that through that boy, and it wasn't the first time, by the way, they had done that to that boy. It was one of the things the grandmother told me when we were talking. I had briefly seen him just before he did that. I'd walked past him on the beach when he was out playing in the front of the house, and I noticed there was a huge scar in his forehead already. And I had asked the grandmother about it. She said, "Oh, well, last year he was in the back of his father's pickup truck playing with a cat. The cat jumped out. He jumped out after the cat head first, right? Like he could fly. And he, like Superman, he just jumped out of the back of the pickup truck, fell like a rock, hit his head on the trailer hitch, and busted his forehead open. So this is what the grandmother was alluding to when she said, "I think he thinks he can fly." When she said that, I immediately got this impression, oh yeah, because there are voices telling him he can fly, which he can't, obviously, but kids, whatever, he was going with the voices, and that was the end result. So I felt I was under attack. I was literally fearing for my life, and so bottom line is, I ended up that night, which was an equinox, I ended up going up on top of a mountain and praying or meditating like my life depended on it. And it just so happened that particular equinox, there was a full moon rising as the sun was setting. It was really very powerful. And I ended up spending the entire night there unintentionally, okay? But I needed some help, and I didn't know who to call. And so I sat there on the ground for many hours, and I began to say Om in a way where I was actually placing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, and I was resonating all the way from my root chakra up to my crown, okay? And I was only 25 at the time, and I had some understanding of metaphysics and yoga and stuff, but this was more just like instinctual. And it was a little bit of act of desperation on my part. I needed help, and I didn't know what I was dealing with, honestly, but it was very frightening. And so anyway, at some point I got really tired, and I'm guessing it was around midnight based on the position of the moon, because I don't like wearing a watch. I rarely do. And so I laid down on a cement slab. I was up in the wilderness, but where I was sitting on this dirt road was the ruins of a military facility left over from the Cold War. It was an old radar tower installation. It was mostly dismantled. In any case, I laid down on the cement, and almost immediately went out of my body. And when I was out, and in that, I mean, I was completely awake, and I was completely aware. In other words, I was lucid. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't dreaming. And I felt at that point I was safe, that those entities, whatever those parasites were, I felt they could not follow me there. And that only lasted, though, very briefly, because then I saw something moving, and then I realized it was moving towards me. And of course, now I'm up in the mountains by myself in a wilderness area. At least my body was. I mean, I was in this, again, I was out of my body in another dimension altogether, but I was still concerned. It's just an instinct, right? I mean, so I was on alert, high alert. Now I see this motion, I see it's coming towards me. And then much to my surprise, as I'm looking at this thing, getting closer, until it's like literally facing, like right in front of me. It was a man with long hair and a beard, wearing a robe. You would say a atypical icon of Jesus. It wasn't Jesus. It just looked like it, just so people get a visual. But this guy was radiating light that was brighter than all the light that we were in. In that dimension, everything to me looked like a light, but he was brighter than all of that light. In fact, there was even light coming out of his eyes, which completely freaked me out. I still remember that. I'll never forget it. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So naturally, I thought, who is that? And he said, I'm the Father. And it made no sense to me whatsoever. And then he started laughing. And for the longest time, Andrew, I used to tell people when I did talk about this, I used to say, but it wasn't sinister. His laughter was not sinister, which is a lie. It was very sinister. It was straight up evil. And you got to understand, at the time, I really needed help. I was hoping naively that I would get some help. And in fact, what I got was him. I had no idea that he was the one that created those parasites, and that what I had done had interrupted his agenda, his need to feed. And, he, according to Sitchin, Enki feels that he is the father of modern mankind. He also feels he's the savior, that he saved us from the flood, that we wouldn't even be here now if it wasn't for him. So in his twisted logic, he actually believes that. So on some level, he does look at me and all of us as his children. And again, let me be really clear about this. I don't hate him, but I was pretty upset by the time I finally realized who he was. I wasn't happy about it. I wish he had just told me up front. I think it would have been a lot better, a lot more healthy, to just be honest. I mean, that's just how I am. But anyway, I came back down off the mountain. Well, no, he started laughing at me, and then the next thing I know, I sat bolt upright. I thought only maybe not even a minute had passed. That's how it felt to me, honestly. Okay. I thought I just laid down, was having this weird out of body vision, and bam, I thought, I'm right back where I started, right? Until I looked and saw that now the moon, which was overhead when I laid down, was now setting on the horizon, which totally freaked me out because I was 100% awake when I went out of my body and had this encounter. And yet hours had gone by and I was laying on cement. I mean, look, I'm a light sleeper as it is, man. It's just, for me to be laying on cement and be completely blank like that, go from 100% lucid to like zero, nothing, that made no sense to me. But again, in retrospect, I understand it now. That's one of the things he does. He likes to erase our memory or block our memories. This is what he does to us every time we reincarnate here. It makes it easier to control us. So anyway, the reason he was confronting me is because I had interrupted something that, it was his doing. I had no right to do that. And he was basically making sure that I wasn't going to do it again, or at least so he thought. I went back to work after the sun came up. I went back to work at the beach. I checked. I was compelled. None of this was part of my job as a security guard, by the way. I was just compelled as an empathic human being. I was concerned. Because when the boy left, you got to understand, in Malibu, there's no hospitals. And the fact that they were driving him to the nearest hospital like that, I figured there's a really good chance he didn't even make it to the hospital. So I went over and I went inside the house. I spoke to the grandparents. Of course, they were really still in a state of shock, very, very drained by the whole experience. I don't know where the parents were, but they said the grandson, they said he's going to live. He lost a lot of blood. and that he had to have over 300 stitches in his head and face. So the scar he had on his head before, that was nothing, man. That was just minor compared to what he had, from that other that other event. And so they tell me this, and I look at them, and the next thing I know, I say to them, well, you can heal. I said, you can heal the scars on his face, but unless you heal the scars on his soul, this is going to happen again. And as I said that to them, God, I wish I could see my face. I was so confused by what I was saying because I didn't know why I was saying it. And then I thought, oh God. I mean, because their reaction was like, I'm not even sure that they heard me because they were still so badly in shock by the whole thing. But I think they did. Whatever. I said it. I heard what I said. And then I felt really embarrassed and confused, and I left. And I went back to where my little station was as head of security for these elite homeowners. And I felt utterly baffled. I mean, really, I was so confused by what was going on. And I wanted to just dismiss the whole thing as just like, I wanted to be in denial of what was happening. I really did. And then a girl came up and sat down next to me. She was a friend of my girlfriend at the time. And she said, was really excited. She said, Robert, I saw you in my dream last night. I said, so? And she said, well, it was really exciting. You came to my bedroom and then you took me out and you taught me how to fly. I said, okay. And she says, yeah, we went up to the mountains and you taught me. I said, what? She said, yeah, we went up to the mountains. And I was like, what? Yeah, I mean, she's just like, dude, now wait a second. Where I was that night, I hadn't told her any of this yet, obviously. I didn't want her to tell my girlfriend any of this stuff. I didn't even know what was going on. Okay. But where I was sitting that night or having that out-of-body experience that night, this girl's house was just south, maybe 5 miles, 10 miles from where I was located that night. Here she is telling me that I came to her in an astral body, came and got her out of her bedroom, took her up to the mountains, taught her how to fly, followed her back to her bedroom, made sure she was safe, and then I left. She said it was really very cool. She said it was like something out of Peter Pan. And she also told me, because this was so weird coming from this girl, she had no clue about metaphysics. Her whole life was, going shopping in the mall, smoking cigarettes and chasing guys. That was it at the time, right? But she says to me, she goes, Robert, I think this has something to do with spirituality. I read something about this in my psych class once. And I'm like, okay, this is weird. This is so freaking weird. I felt like I was in an episode of The Twilight Zone, but, I was not watching it. I was in it. And I still wanted to dismiss this as some weird, freaky thing, okay? Because I'd never experienced anything quite like that before. And the final piece of the puzzle was when I got home later that day, the phone rang, and it was my grandmother. And now remember what I said? I was up on a mountain. The girl lives about 10 miles south of my position in the mountains. My grandmother at the time lived about 10 miles north. She says to me, Robert, I saw you at the foot of my bed last night in a dream. And she said it was the most beautiful dream I've ever had. And you were trying to tell me something, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember. She says, I was so struck by the way your appearance. She says, there was light all around you like a Christmas tree. It was dancing all around you. I'm like, what? My grandmother was a very spiritual person. And coming from her, I could not deny what she was telling me, right? She was giving me a message. And I feel that both of those women giving me that message was undeniably coming from a divine source, unlike what I had experienced with Enki. It was the opposite polarity. Okay, and what I'm trying to say is most of us are just pawns of the Archons, but we're not just being influenced by these negative parasitic entities. We are being influenced by both sides because those divine beings we are all related to, are very concerned about this infection that's going on here, this psychopathic, parasitic infection. They care about us because we're all family, and they're doing what they can to assist us. Because if they hadn't done that for me, I would never be discussing any of this stuff with you or all the other people that I've talked to. I mean, and I've literally talked to millions of people at this point, Andrew. And it isn't about me, okay? This is about us. I'm talking about our condition, the human condition. Yes, it's very convoluted. It's pretty complex, but not entirely. I mean, we can comprehend this, okay, if we're given the right. In other words, it's not totally incomprehensible. That's what I'm trying to say. It's very hard to put it in the proper context. So that was the struggle for me. And honestly, it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a period of decades. And every time I got to the point where I thought I understood what was going on, I realized that I didn't know. I really didn't understand this. And okay, so it's been 31 years since I've had that experience. I am still working on that. I'm still open to new information. I'm not saying I know everything. In fact, I'm saying anybody who tells you that they have all the answers on this, I don't trust it at all. I don't think we can. Anyway, sorry to ramble about that.
It was a fascinating story, to say the least. I'm glad you could wanted to give you the chance to give that out. Love giving my guests, who can be good primary sources in this kind of stuff, a chance to say what they have to say. But with that being said, if someone else may have something to say here, I see there's one caller in the queue. They may just be listening because there's no question mark next to their number, but
okay.
Just for the hell of it, I'll see if they have a question for you. Area code 916, you are on the air. What's your name, where you're from? What's your question, if you have one?
This is in your possession. I will keep it somewhere close by you.
Area code 916. I presume you're just listening. Going once.
I'll lock it up.
Going twice. As they say in Japan, sayonara. All right.
Yeah,
it probably
it sounded like she's giving somebody a reading there. That was weird.
Interesting. Okay, well, moving on. You mentioned Saturn. A lot of people have popularized the idea how Saturn plays a big role in Illuminati symbolism and plays a role in the Matrix. David Talbot, the Saturn myth, talked about how in the not too distant past, Saturn didn't actually have rings. It was significantly closer to the than the Earth. Not that Earth orbited it, but it was close enough to be considered a second sun for all intents and purposes. And Norman Bergrun's written Ringmakers of Saturn, talked about how Saturn's rings are crystalline and synthetic and such. And David Icke, of course, he's become well known for popularizing the whole Saturn Moon Matrix thing, talking about how Saturn acts as a broadcasting radio system, well, the ring specifically, and he claims that the moon, being an artificial body, amplifies the energy down to Earth to keep us in what he calls a Saturn Moon Matrix. Now, you mentioned the way Saturn broadcasts the energy. I think you mentioned somewhere it's like throw a pebble or a rock in water. You will see ripples, waves, ripples emanating from where it comes out, and you can think of that as analogous to the Saturn Moon Matrix, the way it emanates. Now, I've often thought of saying, well, the Saturn Moon Matrix, it broadcasts energy somewhat like a crystal radio, because the rings, they're crystalline in nature, and you can think of it as like a crystal radio broadcast, but you seem to prefer the ripple analogy. So to help people make better sense of the how the Saturn Moon, and also what it does, because they say it keeps us in the illusion of time, it suppresses the feminine energy, which the moon mainly does, because the moon is the ball and chain around the feminine, not so much the matrix. And also just there's other things it does. And George Kavaslis, when I had him in a private session, I wanted to talk about the Saturn Moon Matrix with him, because he's talked about it in some of his presentations. Well, not so much the moon part, but the Saturn part. And he said it's very, very complicated. I would need a whole show to go through all the ins and outs of how the matrix actually works. But well, I'd like to give you the chance to try to talk about this maybe in 10 minutes or so, because I got some other questions for you. But see what you could do. Maybe it's the best to your knowledge and ability. Explain this in greater detail for those that want to make sense of how the Saturn matrix works. Yeah,
it's a smaller node of a very much larger broadcast mechanism. Which allegedly is a cube shape that we are in, this false construct, which it emanates a vibratory rate that is literally suppressing or compressing our consciousness, our entire being, everything has been slowed down. Now I'm going to have to explain what consciousness is, and please do not gloss over this, people. Okay, this is essential to knowing who you are and what you're capable of. And if you've heard me say it before, I'm sorry, but I'll make it brief. Consciousness is a waveform. I believe it's being broadcast or generated by our soul. That's a whole nother topic. But the point is, consciousness is really a measurable wave form. It's not being broadcast by our brain. It's being transmitted through. It's okay. Our brains are transceivers. In fact, our entire being is that way. But there's three levels of consciousness that we need to understand. Pure consciousness, which is a higher vibratory rate than energy. Energy is consciousness at a lower vibratory rate. Matter is consciousness at a much lower vibratory rate. So most of everything we see around us, we're focused on matter. And obviously it's being animated by energy. But what is manifesting all the energy and the matter? It's consciousness. That model is now being called digital physics. It's relatively new on this world, but I believe it is primordial. I think it's essential. It's fundamental in the sense that everybody who is not in this prison, I believe this is one of the first things that they're instructed when they go to a learning institution. The reason it's important is because we are conscious beings and we have the ability to create. We were created by a creator to create. But we're using our imagination, our creative ability to actually create things that are destructive. So it cancels itself out. It's not really the same thing. So here's the thing. You know, avatars in India allegedly can manifest ash out of thin air, right? That's what they claim. But it goes much further than that. That's just a demonstration to show that consciousness can lower itself down into energy and down beyond that into matter. But it all starts in something we are calling the imagination. It's where you image things. Okay, right? You understand? Like if I say, just imagine an apple falling off a tree. Well, you can do that. If you're a healthy human being, you can do that. But where are you doing that? It's not a physical thing. It's your consciousness. It's our consciousness that's doing that. So the analogy I use is much like a drop of water that can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas, depending on its vibratory rate. Consciousness, too, has different vibratory rates. And that is what makes up our reality. One of the interesting things that happened to me when I was living in New England was I met a shaman there. And he told me in our first meeting, he says, we all exist within the mind of God. And I said, you're right. And he looked at me really weird. He didn't expect me to say that. And I said, and yes, you're right. And here's why. And I explained to him digital physics. And then I said, it's not as though there is one God. It's all connected. It may be a holographic fractal, but it's all self-referential. This is what Bell's theorem tells us, that everything is entangled. Everything is connected to everything else. So they call it entanglement. And I saw this. I was shown this up in the mountains of Malibu. I mean, after I met Enki, I kept going back up there. I was actually hoping to meet him again, not knowing who he was. I wanted to ask him some questions. What ended up happening is I found those ancient Lemurian ruins, and I started having a lot of close encounters with UFOs, which was extremely frustrating, but whatever, it happened. And one of the things that was shown to me one night when I was having encounters with them, this was shown to me mentally, was that everything is connected through a web of light, that we are like seeds of light. Our souls are like seeds of light that are growing in a garden. We were born from a tree of light that was once a seed of light. Okay, so when I say holographic fractal, man, that doesn't resonate with people. It's an organic process. I want to help people visualize and put it into the proper context who we really are and what we're here to do. We're creators, okay? But we are our potential is not being realized, obviously, because of this mental illness. Again, if everything's it's all about consciousness and our ability to create, and yet our consciousness is so badly infected or affected that we cannot function properly, right? So this is one of the reasons it's important. This is one of the reasons the divine ones are so working diligently to help us get well. And part of the problem is that the frequencies that they're putting out, not on just this planet, but like you said, Saturn and Moon, is part of a much larger complex that's keeps from where we're at, everything is invisible. The rest of the universe to us is invisible. They call it dark matter, dark energy. It's only dark to us because we have been so badly switched off. I think that when, if we were healthy, we would see all of it for what it is. And I think that's one of the things that happens once we step out of our bodies and have less limitations. We can see things, and all it looks like is light. I mean, that's not all it is, and just not to trivialize light. It's just that darkness is an illusion. Let's put it this way, scientifically, we've been able to measure from infrared to ultraviolet, right? If you look at that spectrum, our eyes can only see a very, very narrow portion in the middle of that. And that was done to us deliberately to keep us under control. So I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons that they're broadcasting these frequencies. Part of it is to remain like in a stealth mode from the rest of creation. But it's also controlling us and diminishing our ability to connect with each other through the web of light and, of course, the rest of creation. I hope that answered your question.
Well, you did your best, and there's, like I said, like George Vosla said, there's a lot more to talk about it, which you can't simply talk about in just one show. If anybody out there has some money to spare, maybe you can set up a private session with George and pick up where I left off and ask him to talk about the whole Saturn Moon Matrix in much greater detail as to how the ins and outs of it work. But switching gears, you make it seem like Orion plays such a big role in all the unpleasant things going on planet Earth. Now, I'm not going to argue with that. It has come up in conversation among others, other researchers and contactees and such. However, to say that it's the cream of the crop among the bad guys might be a little bit off course, because getting back to Alex Collier's presentations that he gave like in the mid-90s, he's not the only one that talked about this, but he really popularized this with those presentations, and nobody gave him credit for it at the time, but now they're taking him more seriously. He talked about how the bad guys on this planet, there's a 3-tier hierarchy. He put Zeta Reticuli at the bottom, gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli, and then above that he put a group of ETs, grays, and also reptilians from Orion, and then above that he put reptilian aliens from the Alpha Draconis star system. And Andrew Bartzis, when I spoke to him at that same conference in 2013 in Florida, he has said that there's 18 species of reptilian alien influencing our reality on Earth, and only one is malevolent. And I asked him, well, that doesn't make sense, because there's not just the Alpha Draconans, there's ones from Hydra, aquatic ones from Sirius, ones from Orion. So how can you say that there's only one malevolent group? He says that they're all clones of the Alpha Draconans, and it just people tend to look at it differently as different groups, different races. But when it all comes down to it, he asserts that they are all clones of the Alpha Draconan reptilians. And like Collier asserted, to say that Orion's the cream of the crop of the bad guys, no, it's the Alpha Draconans who are the cream of the crop of the bad guys. So do you agree or disagree? And if you do disagree, how would you look at the Alpha Draconis, and also, for that matter, the Zeta Reticuli star systems, factoring into what the bad guys are doing here on this planet?
Okay, well, the grays I think if you're talking about Zetas, those are clones. They are also android, cyborg type clone army that's part of Enki's empire. I mean, Enki originated in Orion. It doesn't mean everybody from Orion, the original Orion Empire, is evil. They're not infected. Not everybody is infected by this parasite. I mean, the analogy I use is like a dog that goes this, loving, very obedient part of your family, and then it gets rabies, and then it's no longer loving and it's no longer obedient. It doesn't even recognize who you are. Well, that's essentially what's happened to Enki and his crew, and everybody else that's become psychopathic or parasitic by this infection. So it's kind of misleading to say wherever he came from in Orion, he's not there now. He came here. He set up his own empire. My understanding, he has his base, his court is centered in Aldebaran. It's the Eye of Taurus. And he has a massive influence over what goes on in the Pleiades and Sirius. If you have read the contact notes with Billy Meyer, you'll notice that other than Semyaz, the other person he talks to the most allegedly is Ptah. People don't realize that is Enki. Barbara Marciniak talks about him a lot too. This whole, it's like a lot of people are really pro Enki, and that's fine if you want to go for it. Like I said, for 29 years, I thought he was actually here to help me, and we were in pretty much regular communication. I could have sworn he was. I understand it. Okay, I understand it. It's really easy to fall into that trap, unfortunately. Do we want to talk about Alex Collier? Did you know I saved his life? When you probably have no idea who I really am, do you?
Yeah, you were breaking up there a little bit. What did you say?
Alex Collier used to be friends of mine for you? Many years. Oh. Yeah, because I saved his life one night up in the mountains where the mountains where I met Enki. Alex moved into that location shortly after I had that experience, and we met and became friends. And I took him up there and I showed him those ruins. At the time when, like I said, I was trying to have more contact or trying to get some answers. And that's how I met Alex when he first moved to Malibu. That's my hometown. He moved there at a time when I was just starting to have really strange events that I've just sort of touched the surface with you about. But, I knew Alex back before he was speaking. He was a retired IRS agent that was doing taxes for people at the time. And I just, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that he came out with later that he claims, I don't put any credence in it. It's like, again, I wish him well, but I don't understand why he tells people a lot of the stuff that he says. It's too bad. It's really, really too bad. This is a big problem. Alternative media, the new age and stuff, it's like there's a lot of nonsense out there. We know the mainstream media is just full of it. Obviously, they have an agenda to control people, but people assume that the alternative media is immune from manipulation by these entities, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, like I said, they created all the religions. They are essentially have created the new religion of the so-called New Age through their various agents, and it's a mess. It's an absolute Gordian knot. It's really difficult to untangle. So I would just caution people, just because somebody says something doesn't mean. Here's the other problem, Andrew, is like we are conditioned to look for someone to give us answers. We are conditioned to follow an authority figure, and this is a huge problem for us. It's conditioning. It's like a Stockholm syndrome. We are identifying with our captors and controllers in order to survive, or at least that's what we think. That's what we're conditioned to believe that will happen. It's not reality, okay? But that's the perception, and so we're stuck with that right now. I mean, this is the ultimate farce we see every time the election cycle comes up. If you just vote for this person, things are going to get better. If you don't, things are going to get worse. And as though that one person, that one authority figure is going to resolve the bigger problem, and they're not. This isn't like that. There isn't a silver bullet. As far as I can tell, there isn't a savior. We are supposed to be doing something for ourselves. And this is kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier. You were identifying the problem. That's fine, up to a point. We have to also focus on the solution to the problem. One comes before the other, okay? And I believe we've already focused, not just in this show, but as a species, we've focused, a lot of people are aware of the problem, a lot more now than when I first started talking about it in 2011. I published my first article in 2011 about these parasites. I mean, the Gnostics called them what they call Archons, but pretty much every culture has an awareness. If you go back in time far enough, you'll find it. Pretty much everybody knows about these parasites. Call them demons, jinn, you name it. Watiko. I mean, it's all the same thing, and we're all being affected by it to some degree. So what do we do about it? Right? I think that's the most important question. How do we deal with these things?
Well, okay, the simple answer is realize what infinite consciousness is, realize that is what you are, and you realize that is what you are, then that can open up a whole new can of worms in regards to being the Archons and spreading service to others behavior around consciousness and the earth and everywhere else. Of course, that's easier said than done, many would assert. But if you want a simple solution, I guess that's the number one solution in and of a nutshell. So with that being said, you got any advice on how that solution can be manifested?
Yeah, yes, you have to start. We have to start somewhere, and it starts individually. Before we can work together collectively, we have to do something individually. So I suggest 3 simple things anybody can do anywhere at any time. It's free. Has nothing to do with politics or religion. Okay. So first thing is be calm. Again, like you said, that's really much easier said than done. But at the moment when you feel yourself losing control, that's the most important time for you to be in control. In essence, if you do not control your thoughts and emotions, you will be controlled by them externally. And that's exactly what these entities want. They want to control us, and they do a very good job at it. But each one of us has the ability to say, no, I am a sovereign soul. I can remain calm if I choose to do so. I mean, there's a time and a place for losing your temper or really just jumping in somebody's face. But generally speaking, they want us to be like on pins and needles all the time, right? You know, if you turn on the news, they're just constantly provoking us and distracting us. That's not healthy. That's not a human. That's not the normal state. It's very, very harmful, and it's actually helping them to remain in control. So be calm, no matter what. Be calm, all right? Whenever possible. Control yourself. Control your emotions and thoughts. Be kind. Be kind to yourself first. Forgive yourself and forgive others. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, okay? Doesn't mean you have to agree with a lot of the crap that's going on. Just be kind to yourself and others, especially strangers, because it's infectious in a positive way. If you're kind to yourself, you're going to feel better about life. If you're kind to others, they're going to feel better about themselves, and it will go exponentially like that, okay? I know this sounds really simple, people, but I'm telling you it works. I know this for a fact. The third thing that we've already touched on is be creative. Do something, anything to be creative. Why? Because it's part of our divine birthright. It's part of our true potential. And you have to walk before you can learn to run. I should say we have to learn how to walk. And so whatever it may be, find something that you enjoy that is creative and use that as your first baby steps. Some people that are listening to this show probably are already creative and understand what I'm saying. But it's important to nurture that and develop that aspect of ourselves. And all 3 of those things, if you work on all 3 of those things, you keep them. It's very simple, right? Calm, kind, creative. It's like pouring water on the fire. Instead of fighting the fire with fire, because I know a lot of people are pissed off about this. I understand it. But being upset with them or ridiculing them or trying to destroy them that's not the answer, in my opinion, based on my experience, okay? Personal experience with these entities, including Enki directly. The best way is that I found is what I've just outlined. There's also articles that I've written about this that are free on my website under the article section if you want to read more specifically, or people, if you have a specific question or comment, I'm sure some people do because I get email all the time from people all over the world. It's fine. I will answer no matter what you send me. I'm gonna, unless it's completely nonsense, I will respond to any emails you send me through my website at editor@unicusmagazine.com. Hey, Andrew.
Yep.
Do you realize, I know you're working your ass off doing this. I have been working my ass off too. And it's like, I don't know if you're getting a lot of positive feedback, but I want you to know that I am. I hope you are too, because some days when you're dealing with a lot of technical stuff or bills or whatever, it's difficult. I don't think a lot of people listening to these shows understands how hard it is, how much we are being of service to others by doing these, having these conversations, putting up these websites and shows. But I can tell you, it is having an impact. It is having a very positive effect based on the feedback that I'm getting, based on the, I also monitor various comments that people are making in public places. So I know that we are having a very positive effect, and I feel like people like yourself need to know that and should be acknowledged for doing this kind of work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. And I don't really, I read all the comments too. I never get rid of any of my comments because I firmly believe the trolls are the least of my problems, but don't let anybody discredit you. It's not really their business, your business, what they think, and don't let it get the better of you. They're just out. The more they try to discredit you, the more they're putting themselves out in the open. So that ruins the Archon agenda in itself. So, but enough of that.
The other thing, hang on a second, Andrew. Journalism is dead. Let's be very clear about this. People do not engage in journalism anymore. It used to be, the process was you're supposed to be completely unbiased, and you're supposed to keep your opinion out of the information that you are reporting that has been validated by at least two credible sources or more, right? Pretty simple stuff. It's gone. That is gone. That model is destroyed. Now what is going on? Everybody's giving an opinion. Okay, so we're engaging in punditry. Wonderful. And of course, there's going to be a lot of people that do not agree. But does that mean everybody's wrong? Or is everybody right? Or are we just all so freaking confused we don't know what is going on? It's a mess is what I'm trying to say. Whether it's alternative media or the mainstream, people are really confused more than ever because of the information overload and because there are just so many opinions that don't sync up, right? Look, I'm pointing out the obvious for a reason. It's like, this is part of the problem. We want to have answers, but what are we sharing with you guys? Opinions. It's like, very little information, and then every time somebody says, no, this information's right, no, and we just argue about it, I'm not sure we're actually getting where we want to be. I don't think we're there yet, in other words. And honestly, what I think is going to happen is we're going to be hit by something. Those of us who've lived from 87 to 2012, that was a very special time. There was a lot more energy coming onto the planet, and our consciousness has been accelerated, or I should say our connectivity increased. Our consciousness through our DNA was increased because the energy that was coming onto the planet was basically penetrating the matrix. But I think there's one other event that was in preparation for what comes next. There is going to be a wave or a series of waves of energy that wash over this planet that's going to absolutely reconnect everybody's DNA through that web of light that I was talking about. And when that happens, people are suddenly going to see and know things that is going to astonish them, to put it mildly. So I'm just kind of warning people now, for what it's worth, do your best, prepare yourself. What I'm trying to say is there's a lot of it more. We could all have a mass realization or a mass awakening at any moment. And if you're unprepared for it, it's probably going to shock some people, literally, physically. They're just going to drop dead. It's just going to be so overwhelming when they suddenly can see and know and feel things that a lot of it they hadn't even imagined existed. Okay, so, and yet that's part of the healing. That is what I was shown. That's one of the contingency plans for actually, healing can be pretty extreme, man. When people are really ill, we use all kinds of therapy, right, to get somebody, like, I don't agree with chemotherapy, but so that's just an example, right? Surgery is another, that's considered a therapy. But there are beings that are trying to help us. They are doing what they're doing. Okay, you don't read about it on the news, but we're talking about it in these alternative media forms. And I'm not the only one saying this. There's other people who have seen this coming. So I do think it's part of the process. When, I have no idea. But I think it is going to happen in our lifetime.
Don't bother giving dates. You'll have egg in your face if you give dates. Most people have found out because time's an illusion.
I have no idea. Yeah, actually, Andrew, that's a good point. If I did somehow was given a date, I would not say it publicly, because people would dismiss it. The point is just to be ready. It could happen at any time. We don't know. I don't know, and that's fine. I don't need to know all this stuff. I was just, how come it came up is because I was asking mentally. I was asking some of the divine beings. I said, "Could you please show me how is this going to be resolved?" I get it now. It's clear to me the problem. How on your side of this, not my side, how on the bigger picture, how are you guys going to help make this go away? How are you going to help us heal our consciousness collectively? Because I don't think we can do it. Individually, yes, we can do a lot. We should. But the bigger problem, like we're talking about so we get clear, but we're surrounded by people that are not, or more importantly, that we're still stuck in a matrix. No, there's got to be something external that's going to happen. That was my intuition. And so I asked them, what do you got? How are you going to fix it? And that's what they showed me. And boy, was I surprised when I found a few other sources that said essentially the same thing, that it's coming. And I was like, okay, we should be prepared at some level, at least know it's coming. So when it hits, we're not completely caught off guard. So that's the only reason I mention it.
Yeah, I have no doubt it's coming too. One could say you're going to lose your patience with some of the things that you think are going to happen but aren't. This past summer, I heard from some sources talking about how Edward Snowden's going to release something about some holy shit revelation, and some thought, well, maybe he was waiting until the movie that's based on him comes out. Well, that's not the case. What's the holdup? I'm thinking, is he think too many people are going to commit suicide or something because he has to release is too shocking, so he's holding it back? I'm thinking, well, that would be ridiculous. If people commit suicide because they can't handle the truth, well, no, he shouldn't be upset about that. They got no one to blame but themselves for being suicidal. So if Edward Snowden, if you're listening to this, please, could you just release it and make everybody happy? Because some people we love you, man, but we're losing our patience with you. And that goes with a lot of other people with whistleblowers who are acting as gatekeepers for whatever the reason. We love you, but we're losing our patience with you because you're holding it back for whatever the reason, and there is no excuse for that, as far as I'm concerned. Just so you know, there's about 5 minutes and 30 seconds left on the live feed. Okay. There is one caller here in the queue. Might as well, if I don't think they have anything to say, but if they do, I'll get them on just for a couple of minutes. It's again the number 111-111-1111. You've been on the air for 12 minutes here in the queue, so now's your chance to come on. You're on the air. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question? If you got one. You got one. Okay. How you doing? Oh, never mind. You dropped.
That's really, I heard a click. So, okay. So what that series of ones that you're talking about, I'm calling you through Skype.
Yeah.
And there's no phone number, so it gives you this random designation. And
Right.
just so you know, like I'm sitting here in Hong Kong, right, and calling you through Skype.
Right. So, well, he just dropped right after I got him on. He didn't have to do that. If he wanted to stick around, he could have just kept quiet, and I could have just, all right, well, that's his loss for not being able to get this. So anyway, with that being said, we already talked about how you, like where people can get you, your Unicus website and such, and how your email, you did mention that earlier. But I guess since I mentioned that thing about whistleblowers playing gatekeepers and some of the reasons why they do that. One person said Edward Snowden, he's specifically using the information that he has about the NSA as like a cloak to protect himself, as a way of saying to all the powers that be, stay away from me. If you hurt me, I'm going to release information about you. But I'm thinking, okay, fair enough. But if you release all the information all at once, I don't think anybody's going to come after you any more or less than they would if you didn't release it all at once. So that kind of doesn't really make sense to you as a cloak and dagger. And Julian Assange, I mean, he pissed off a few people about a week ago by not coming out at 3 a.m. with something like Alex Jones of InfoWars said, and he and his crew were staying up late for that, and it didn't work out. And he's released stuff recently.
Stuff. Okay,
right,
I mean, he has been releasing stuff. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. And I know, he's playing some games too, but I mean, his life is hell. The guy is locked up essentially, and he's got death threats. And so, it's not, I mean, you and I are sitting here having this conversation. We don't have that same kind of pressure, right? Or restrictions on us, fortunately, at this time. But I tell you, look, I have a problem with all this stuff. There is a global surveillance system that is hardware, and it's not just the NSA, it's the NRO, National Reconnaissance Organization, is watching everybody from space, and they have been for a long time. So it's not just like they're not just grabbing all our digital data. They literally have optics up there. They can watch everybody all the freaking time. Question is why? We're not all terrorists, right? Okay, so let's take just a stab at this. Who do you think they're surveilling us for? Why does everybody have to be under a microscope? And I'll just cut to the chase. It's because we're all part of an empire. It's a top down, it's a pyramid. The all-seeing eye is Enki. He is watching all his children. All the subjects are under his authority. Now, the mental parasites I told you about, they're also watching us. Not only do they influence us subtly through mental manipulation, the voices, but they also listen to everything we say. They know everything we feel, and they relay that information back through a central processing core. So we are, in other words, there's no privacy. There never has been. Sorry, people, but that was proven to me a long time ago. I'm sorry to have to tell people this, but it's a lot worse than we're being led to believe. There's no such thing as privacy. And they would like us to believe we have no sovereignty. So why even declare it, right? Well, the fact that we haven't declared our sovereignty is one of the things that keeps us enslaved. So again, that's something that I urge people to do, not in just some half-assed way, but really feel it when the time's right. Write it down, say it out loud, feel it in your soul. Know that you are a seed of light. You are a divine being. And you're imprisoned, but that doesn't mean you're not sovereign. It just means you're just being held against your will. And it's not going to last forever, okay? This is going to end at some point. It's unsustainable. It was never meant to be like this, and we'll get out at some point. We'll get past it.
No question about that. And since there's only 35 seconds left on the Blog Talk live feed, I guess I'll bring this show to an end. I think this was a fascinating interview, even though you did regurgitate some things that you talked about in past interviews. That's okay. I still want to do that with a lot of my guests for the sake of new listeners and all that. And I'm sure some new things that you talked about in my interview here that you didn't talk about with other people. So it was a pleasure having you on. I'll upload this interview to YouTube. And and as far as trying to spread on some social media too. Good luck on your future endeavors, and I hope that all these things you say come to fruition. Take care now, Robert.
Thanks. You too, Andrew. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, folks, next week I'll be having Dr. Horace Drew, nicknamed Red Collie, on the show. This will be my next week's on the 19th will be my last show on Blog Talk Radio. No sense in paying $399 a year for Blog Talk subscription. Now that I'm a Capricorn, I can just stream everything through Skype to Skype interviews with my guests. I'm also going to try to get all my shows on iTunes as well to compensate for that. So Dr. Horace Drew, nicknamed Red Collie, next week, talk about crop circles and a whole slew of other things. This is Andrew Fisher signing off from Nature of Reality Radio. Namaste. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.